Hey you guys, welcome back to Flickers of Fear. So, I kept seeing this really wonderfully cheesy looking 80s soap opera kind of thing, this horror movie, and I kept seeing it pop up like every time I was scrolling through Amazon Prime. Now, I could tell that it was made for TV just by, obviously Susan Lucci is on there with her big ass 80s hair, and it just kind of had like that cheap looking aesthetic to it. So you know that I had to get around to seeing that like eventually, right? Because I love 70s and 80s made for TV horror movies. It's one of my favorite things. Now this movie, by the way, is called Invitation to Hell. And although I had no idea about this when I first started watching it, it was directed by none other than Wes Craven. And it aired in 1984, which, if you'll remember, was the same year that A Nightmare on Elm Street and The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 were released, which obviously were also directed by Wes Craven. Now, this actually isn't the first made-for-TV Wes Craven movie that I've seen. Tom and I actually reviewed one called Summer of Fear from 1978. We did a live stream about it. That had Linda Blair in it, and it was actually like pretty decent. Invitation to Hell, though, this, oh my god. So this starts out with this just laugh out loud funny sequence. And it immediately just got me pumped, like for the oncoming cheese. I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. So Susan Lucci plays a character named Jessica Jones. No, not the Marvel Jessica Jones. Completely different. So she's like sashaying through this upper class suburb type thing. Dressed in kind of the height of dynasty finery, you know. Now, there are a few brief shots of her kind of just walking up toward the street, and then it's intercut with scenes of like this guy driving a car along the same street. So you just know that these two are going to meet up at some point, if you catch my drift. And indeed, it does come to pass. This careless driver, who I think is somebody's chauffeur they mentioned, runs down poor Susan Lucci like an unlucky armadillo. And I'm sitting there thinking, it's like for somebody that got third billing on this thing, she sure didn't last long. You know, I'm like, man, they killed her off like in the first 5 seconds. But wait, only a second after she goes under the wheels of this car, she sort of like raises up completely unharmed, like to a standing position behind the car, and then whips her hand out like that, like she's casting a spell. And then the driver starts like smoking and smoldering like behind the wheel. And he eventually dies while everybody else in the neighborhood is just like walking around like it's a normal Tuesday fucking morning. You know what I mean? So right off the bat, you know that there's some kind of nefarious shit going on in this perfect suburb, as if the title of the movie didn't already clue you into that. So we're then introduced to our main protagonists. These are the Winslow family. And the dad, the husband, is named Matt. He's played by Robert Urich. He was in a lot of TV back then. The mom and the wife is named Patricia. He's played by Joanna Cassidy, also in a lot of TV back then. And they have 2 kids named Chrissy and Robert. Now, the 2 kids are actually played by Soleil Moonfry, a.k.a. Punky Rooster, and Barrett Oliver from The Neverending Story. I think he was in Daryl, too, now that I'm thinking about it, and maybe Cocoon. Yeah, he was in a lot of stuff in the 80s. So the family also has a dog named Albert, who does actually get threatened during the course of the movie, but does come through unscathed. Thank goodness. Nothing bad happens to the dog, so don't worry. Now, Matt is like some kind of aerospace engineer, and he's been working on this high-tech project having to do with a spacesuit that's super, super heat resistant, has cool-ass arm lasers, and has kind of, and this is only 1984, right? But it has this sort of AI system that can detect whether something is human or non-human, and also whether the thing approaching you is harmless or, you know, is out to fuck you up, right? And before you ask, yes, these features of the spacesuit will very much come into play during the climax of the story, so don't worry about that either. So Matt has moved his family to this idyllic suburb, which is called Steaming Springs, which kept, like, auto-correcting in my head to Steaming Pile for some reason. So he's working at this faceless corporation, which has the hilariously on-the-nose name of Micro Digitech, which I thought was very funny. Now, it's implied that he's never worked in the corporate world before, and he's kind of, like, apprehensive about it, but evidently the big paycheck they're offering was enough to make him kind of tamp down his misgivings, right? Now, he has a friend named Tom Peterson, and he's already moved out here and also works at Micro Digitech, and lives in the same suburb with his wife Mary and their kids. So at least like the Winslow family, they're moving here. Like they have friends in the area already. You know what I mean? They're not moving somewhere where they don't know anybody. Now, Patricia Winslow seems particularly stoked about this move, and it's not really said outright, but it's pretty clearly because she's tired of living on an academic's salary, because I guess he was like like he worked at a college or something like that. And she's kind of thinking she wants a taste of that, 1980s big shoulder pad high life, right? She wants like some money. So she immediately starts agitating for new furniture, like to make their house all classy and shit. And Matt, though, he's kind of, he's perfectly happy with their dorm room decor, is what they keep calling it. However, once the neighbor kids come over and start making fun of how old and cheap their furniture is, Matt gives in and lets Patricia go hog wild with the decorating. So soon after settling in, Matt and the family meet Jessica Jones, again played by Susan Lucci. She's like, I guess she's an insurance agent, and she also seems to be the suburb's like unofficial welcoming committee in a kind of way. Now, her and the family kind of get off on the wrong foot at first because Jessica's chauffeur is driving like an asshole and causes Matt to get in kind of like, it's not really a wreck, but he kind of like runs him off the road and kind of fucks his car up a little bit. And his whole family's in the car too. So he's kind of inclined to dislike her immediately. I mean, even though she's very beautiful, she's well put together, and she does apologize for her driver's like driving like an asshole, you know what I mean? She's also very overtly flirtatious, which puts Matt, on his guard even more. Everybody else in town seems to think that, like, the sun shines out of her ass, though. So Matt's getting acclimated at his new job, and they're doing tests of this badass spacesuit that he's working on, and they seem to all be going well, right? One weird thing he notices, though, is that there's this kind of, like, dowdy, like, older secretary lady whose name is Grace, and she's always trying to get his attention and seems to have something important that she needs to tell him. Now, one night he's working late, and he finds her in like a restricted area of the facility, and she gives him this red binder, and basically, desperately is like, you really need to read this, you know what I mean? And he never gets around to it for whatever reason, and the next day he finds out that Grace has been fired. Meanwhile, everybody in town just cannot stop flapping their jaws about the club and how awesome it is. There's a Halloween party coming up, and only members of the club are allowed to go. And Matt also hears from several people at work and, in the neighborhood and stuff, that joining the club is like the only way to get ahead, like both at your job and on the social scene or whatever. Now, Matt is not a joiner, which I was just kind of like, yeah, I hear you, man. I'm the same. And kind of just wishes everyone would shut the fuck up about it. But Patricia really thinks they should become members of the club so they can make more money and hobnob with the elite of Steaming Springs or whatever. The more people try to persuade Matt to join, though, like, the more resistant he becomes, which I admit really kind of endeared his character to me, because that's the same thing I would be doing. Now, it turns out that his friends who were there before, Tom and Mary, they go through the initiation and join the club. And subsequently, Tom gets a big promotion and gets like a big bump in pay. But even this isn't enough for Matt to change his mind, and this starts driving a little bit of a wedge between him and his wife, who's kind of portrayed as like a little bit of a social climber. Now, the initiation ceremony, if you want to call it that, is shown fairly early on in the movie. Like, whoever the family is that's being let into the club, they're all dressed in white bathrobes like it's a fucking day spa or whatever. And then Jessica opens this big-ass vault door, and a bunch of steam comes out, and then she tells them to go into the spring and gives them this, like, really weird, like, invocation-sounding spiel. And then they all go in, and then the door closes behind them. Now, at one point, like, Jessica's giving Matt and Patricia, like, a tour of the clubhouse or whatever it is. And Matt actually kind of sneaks off and sees this vault door, and he swears that he hears, like, screaming or something coming from behind there. So Patricia is getting more and more annoyed by Matt's reluctance to conform to the very obviously sketchy bullshit going on in this town. And so she actually ends up befriending Jessica and starts telling her, like, how much she wishes Matt would get on board with all of this Stepford nonsense that's going on. Matt is not super happy about this friendship because Jessica is very transparently up to something and also possibly evil, and once pretty openly offers him sex if he'll join the club. And he's, like, really weirded out by this. So he again declines. And while I was watching the movie, especially during that scene, it occurred to me that perhaps if the residents of Steaming Springs weren't so goddamn pushy and creepy, they might persuade more people to sign on to their little mephitic plot that they have going on. Just a little constructive criticism. So Jessica then tells Patricia that even though it's normally the rule that the entire family has to join the club as a unit, an exception can be made in this case, and Patricia and the kids can join without Matt if they want to. So Patricia is like super jacked about this and obviously does not see any of the gigantic red flags like waving in her face. And she agrees to get initiated like the very next day. Now at this point in the movie, I actually thought that something would like conspire to keep Patricia and the kids from getting initiated, but I was completely wrong. All three of them put on the spa bathrobes and get herded into the vault door just like the previous family did. Now Patricia and Robert go willingly, while Punky Brewster, Chrissy, it's Punky Brewster to me, I'm sorry. She gets scared at the last minute and tries to like bounce, but she gets strong-armed back in by this kind of bruiser-looking bodyguard dude that's there, I guess, for that specific purpose. Now Matt doesn't actually know that his family has joined the club, but pretty soon after they do, he starts to notice some fairly drastic changes in their behavior. Like the kids start acting like all quiet and sort of shifty. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're up some. Patricia starts dressing very glamorously, like in emulation of Jessica, and kind of starts acting like a queen bitch type of thing. She also decorates the house in a way that's totally not her style. Like before, when she was, whining about like wanting new furniture, she wanted to make it bright and homey and everything like that. But Matt comes home from work one day and finds that she has painted every wall in the place this dark, flat gray color, which actually I kind of liked. And decorated with kind of like a lot of sleek black accents and kind of chic sort of looking thing. I mean, I guess painting the walls blood red and having Baphomet statues and pentagrams and shit like that would have been a little bit too obvious. Most upsettingly, though, Patricia claims that their beloved family dog, Albert, was vicious and had tried to bite her. And she said, "Oh, I never liked that dog." Like, Matt is completely blindsided by this because Patricia had always loved the dog, right? She was the one that got the dog in the first place. And the dog had always been friendly, like it never bitten anybody or nothing. So Matt is even more shocked when he finds out that Patricia took the dog to a veterinarian, who's a guy named Walt, who's actually the husband of Grace, who was the fired secretary from earlier. But Patricia took the dog there, like, to have him put to sleep. So Matt, like, hightails it out to Walt's place and finds, to his great relief, and the relief of the viewer, that Walt hasn't done anything with the dog. He said, "I examined the dog, and there's nothing wrong with him, and he's obviously super friendly." So he's like, "So I just told Patricia that I was going to euthanize him just to get rid of her, but then he just kept him." You know what I mean? So good for him. Good for Walt. During this visit, Matt also learns the very troubling fact that Grace was recently killed in a freak car accident. So Matt is now convinced that something terrible is going on in Steaming Springs and is suspicious that his wife and kids have joined the club behind his back, hence why they're acting so weird. So Matt decides to do his own investigation to figure out what the fuck is going on with this place. During the big Halloween party that they're having at the club, he sneaks into the clubhouse, like while everyone's distracted. And he has this, high-tech thermometer thingy, and he discovers that the temperature behind the vault door is like a bajillion degrees or some shit. It's not that high, but it's like super, super high, like unearthly high. He gets spotted, but actually manages to electrocute the security guard who jumps him. At which point he goes back to his house and gets attacked by his wife and also his kids. Like his wife comes at him with like a bat or some shit like that. And the kids are just like jumping on him and growling like Reagan McNeil. It's a whole thing. So he actually ends up having to knock his wife's ass out and locks both the kids in the closet. So then he goes to his lab at Microdigitech to put on the special spacesuit, which will allow him to see what's behind the vault door at the clubhouse, because obviously the spacesuit is like super heat resistant because you're supposed to be able to go out in space in it, you know what I mean? Now, while he's doing this, he's confronted by his friend Tom, who asks him why he couldn't just go along with all of this stuff, and then he comes at him like with a golf club. So Matt ends up killing his ass too with that arm-mounted laser on the spacesuit that I mentioned earlier. And I was like, wow, Matt's racking up quite a body count, isn't he? So despite having just murdered 2 people and realizing that his family members have presumably been taken over by demons, Matt still has the presence of mind to show up at the Halloween party in the spacesuit and pretend to be Tom, like wearing a costume. Pretty much everybody at the party is fooled because he's wearing a helmet that hides his face, and he's kind of doing a pretty passable impression of Tom's voice. But Jessica is not fooled. She knows exactly who he is, and she starts following him when he surreptitiously starts to head toward the vault. Oh, and remember how I said that the spacesuit would give you a digital reading, like telling you it's like inside of the helmet, like whether something was human or not and whether it meant you harm or not? As you might have guessed, when Jessica kind of falls into the helmet's sights, it informs us that Jessica is not human and is also malevolent, which, duh. Now, Matt actually uses the suit's flamethrower option, because it has that too, and I don't remember if I mentioned that. Basically uses that to try to roast Jessica like a Thanksgiving turkey. But because she's a hell beast, it obviously doesn't work. So Matt is actually able to distract her long enough to get the vault door open, though. And inside, he finds probably about what you would expect, given that this is called Invitation to Hell. It's this red, steaming, stalactite-laden hell, basically, is what it is. It looks like the classic hell. And it's right there behind the store at the Steaming Springs Clubhouse. Now, Matt can actually hear his wife and kids, like, screaming from somewhere, like, way down below. And he looks down this ridiculously high cliff to, you can't really see anything down there because it's too far, but he's just assuming that his family is ostensibly, like, trapped down there. Now, Jessica starts giving your standard villain monologue, but Matt, evidently operating on some, like, pure instinct, I guess, he just jumps off the cliff, like, into this kind of crazy, swirling 1980s-looking special effect. So when he gets to the bottom of the pit, there's this, like, posterized version of Steaming Springs, where the real versions of all the people that have been initiated are presumably trapped forever while their evil doppelgangers are, like, running around up on the surface. So Matt finds his wife and kids in a replica of their house, like, in this other dimension. And even though they seem to be protected by some kind of force field or something, Matt is able to use the power of love or some shit like that to break through the force field and rescues his family. Oh, and also that causes Jessica to blow up as a nice bonus. So when they all wake back up, they're back in their regular house and they're all okay. And the neighbors are saying that the clubhouse completely burned down overnight. No update on the people that Matt killed or whether the other initiated people got rescued from hell either. I was kind of wondering about that. I guess everybody just died in the fire and it was all just covered up. I don't know, whatever. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this movie was cheesy and, like, bonkers as fuck, but I had a really good time with it. It had some slow parts and, like, some cringy bits, especially there was, like, bits where the family were singing and stuff, and I'm like, okay, that wasn't necessary. But in spite of that, it was just a sublimely dumb, entertaining movie, you know what I mean? The acting was very TV movie. The shot compositions were nothing special, even though I will note that this was nominated for a Primetime Emmy for art direction. But, man, like, the sheer silliness of the thing just kind of drew me right in. So if you love TV movies from this era, and you've always wanted to see Susan Lucci playing Satan, or whoever she was supposed to be, a lesser demon, I don't really know, then definitely check this one out. I honestly wouldn't have known that Wes Craven had directed it if his name wasn't in the credits, like, it wasn't super distinctive in that way, but it was still a really amusing watch. The only thing I regret is that I should have had, like, a few drinks while I was watching this, because I think that would have made it even more fun, but oh well, live and learn. So yeah, this movie is on Amazon Prime. It's probably other streaming services have it too, but if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, then you can watch it for free. So yeah, check it out. I thought it was pretty entertaining. And that will do it for this Flickers of Fear. Thank you very much for watching. Remember, like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. And I'll see you guys again on the next one. Bye.